Hello, YouTube, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 9 articles in this episode for you, and the URLs are in of the video for your convenience. This is all about protesters and George Soros. On this episode, this first article I have for you is off of the Daily Caller. It says, Milo protester shoots suspected conservative after he points to racism. A man who shot someone outside a speech at the University of Washington by conservative provocateur Milo Yiannopoulos, white supremacist, and police let the shooter go, even as victims hospitalized with life-threatening injuries. Case of mistaken identity by the anti-racism vigilante, the shooting victim later turned out to be a supporter of Bernie Sanders. And the university president, Anna Marie Koss, wrote a letter Saturday on why one of the protesters attempting to stop this speech had shot someone, but instead questioned why the college had allowed the event to take place. In the weeks leading up to the event, I received many calls and emails from many who wanted this event canceled, some of which cited potential for disruption and conflict. My team and I consulted extensively with the PD and Seattle police beforehand, and while no credible threats were received, I gave serious consideration to calls and emails and consulted with legal scholars and the UW division of the Attorney General's office, the letter reads. So why did I allow the event to go on? First, there was the legal right of our students group to invite speakers, even a controversial one whose message is stigma to many, including me. The shooter turned himself in Friday night after police put out a lookout, but he was released without charges after telling investigators he fired in self-defense during a campus protest, Times reported. The lookout described the suspect as an Asian man in his 50s. One of the law enforcement officials said the man who fired the gun claimed he had been assaulted before the shooting. The other man, whom he believed to be some supremacist, the report said. The shooter was then released pending investigation, it said. Police did not name the shooter. They said 32-year-old victim had a life-threatening gunshot wound to the abdomen. Yiannopoulos is a gay conservative and a Breitbart editor who is currently doing a speaking circuit faggot tour at college campuses railing against political correctness. Said it seized wooden dowels, homemade shields, flares, hammers, and other items from masked individuals who were irate that a conservative was speaking on campus. Progressives have tried to physically prevent people from hearing his ideas on numerous campuses. For students who, to the best of my knowledge, acted with restraint, the college president later said, even though the video and police demonstrate the prevalence of violence at the event. After the shooting, police escorted Milo's audience to safety by having them remove Donald Trump hats and other apparel that made them targets for violence on college campuses. Ironically, even those who wanted to hear Yiannopoulos talk were white supremacists. The shooter may have confused a fellow protester for a member of the alt-right. In a story headlined, Man Shot at UW, No Racist, despite shooter's claim, the Times reported that 2 friends of the victim said he supported Bernie Sanders in the Democratic presidential primary, and an anti-hate tattoo that consists of black swastika surrounded with a slash through it. The University of Washington Police Department incident said guns are banned on campus and called the shooting unfortunate and isolated. The article that I have for you is off of the Washington Examiner. Limo torched in D.C. protest belongs to Muslim immigrant, may cost $70,000 in damages. The limousine that was set on fire during the anti-Trump protest in downtown Washington on Inauguration Day is owned by a Muslim immigrant who says the damage could cost his company $70,000. Muhammad Ashraf, the owner of Nationwide Chauffeur Services, spoke with the Washington Examiner's sister publication, Red Alert Politics, about what happened. In an exclusive interview with Red Alert Politics, Ashraf said he wasn't a supporter of Donald Trump during his campaign, but Friday's protests were completely counterproductive. I have a different point of view, Ashraf told Red Alert. I did not agree with many of the things he said, but that still does not give me the right to go out and affect someone's livelihood. Ashraf noted that the Women's March on Washington and in other cities around the country was a model for how to peaceably protest. I really don't think we need to take this violent route. Ashraf's employee, Louis Viverall, age 58, was dropping a client off at their destination when things turned ugly. Protesters smashed doors and windows in the vicinity, but then turned their attention toward Viverall and the limo. People began pounding on the car and started throwing stones and bricks in his direction. The driver ended up going to the hospital for cuts on his hands and arms from glass being shattered by thrown projectiles. We've been in this business for over 25 years, and this is the first time this has happened, Ashraf said. Ashraf explained that with the loss of the vehicle, his company is now in the hole $70,000 if the insurance doesn't cover riots, plus commission and the medical bills for his driver. A GoFundMe page has been set up to help the company raise money if the insurance won't cover the protest damage. Ashraf said any money raised beyond paying for the car and medical expenses for his employee will go to charities. Seems to me that you would check with the insurance company to see what they cover before you'd start a GoFundMe, but then that's just me. The next one is off of BizPac Review. Watch Big Joe go off on anti-Trump protesters in epic fight you have to see to believe. And there is video in this if you want to pull it up to actually take a look at the video, but I'll read the article. It says, a man who calls himself Big Joe confronted protesters at the Women's March in Los Angeles with a brutal dose of truth. Joe was telling a man who was interviewing him that it was time for America to unite behind the president and give him a chance when one of the peaceful female protesters interrupted and berated him. The woman insisted that President Trump wasn't elected. You're on the bike and you're oblivious, she said to Joe, as if somehow being on a bike rendered him think. Political correctness is a disease, Joe said before going off on a tirade on Planned Parenthood, calling it racist. As he stood surrounded by people shouting at him, Joe didn't back off and gave the protesters the facts. He explained that whatever they think their movement is about, it was hijacked by socialists who are riling them to help get their anarchist agenda ahead. Joe said the protesters bullied people who supported Trump into pretending they didn't, and that's why they are surprised he won. There are so many people that support Trump, but they were afraid to openly support him. But you know, when they supported him in the voting booth, he said. And he had a direct message for the protesters and Hollywood stars saying Trump is not their president. This is the United States of America. You say he's not your president, leave, he said. And there's the video of his epic rant. So you can pull that up to see that for yourself. The next one here is off of WND.com. It's, watch woman kicked off plane for berating Trump supporter. And there is video in this. It says Scott Kotsky had no idea how eventful his flight from Baltimore to Seattle was going to be. The leg room he would have. Armed only with a cell phone, he smiled at his fellow passengers, a husband and wife, as he took his window seat next to the unidentified woman. She had one question for him. Did you come here to cheer or to protest? And he says, I came here to celebrate democracy, ma'am. And says much of the dialogue is caught on this video, but here's the way Kotsky recalls the chain of events. She says, You put a crazed man in charge of the nuclear codes. You should be ashamed. And he says, well, we're all entitled to our opinions here, ma'am. And she says, and I'm entitled to get drunk and puke in your lap. I'm going to throw up right in your lap. You make me sick. Don't talk to me. Don't look at me. Don't you dare put your arm on that armrest. You disgust me. You should be ashamed of yourself. You put a maniac's finger on the button. You're a bigot. You should get off this plane. And he says, ma'am, by definition, bigotry is disparaging someone prior to knowing them simply by their beliefs and opinions. Thank you for being the very thing you preach against. Kotsky said he told a flight attendant the woman insulted him. Is there going to be a problem? The flight attendant asked the woman. The woman told the flight attendant, I told you him to change seats with somebody. The flight attendant cut her off and said, well, you don't have that right. The woman continued to berate Kotsky. I'm trying to get it to scroll up here. It's taking its time. My goodness. Poor little hamsters wore out tonight. And it seems bound determined that it wants to try to play video. Okay, there we go. Passengers cheered as she carried her belongings and exited the aircraft. Someone briefly chanted, USA, USA. So I get a whole row to myself, Kotsky asked. Just to Kotsky that drinks were on him. On these airplanes. Something else. The next one's off of BizPack Review. It says, watch, protesters lights Trump's again. Protester lights Trump supporters hair on fire while chanting love Trump's hate. Hillary supporters have now moved on to attempted murder. That's how one observer characterized this disgusting video showing a peaceful protester setting a Trump supporter's hair on fire on Inauguration Day. The video starts off with a group of hostile anti-Trump protesters surrounding 4 Trump supporters in a crowd as they shout, "Love Trump's hate." When one Trump supporter poses for a photo, a woman in the crowd sets her hair on fire. And there's video of it here, if you want to pull it up to see it. It says the YouTube video caption read, "This happened on Inauguration Day in Washington, D.C., just after Donald Trump was sworn into office. It comes just to show," or try that again, "it just comes to show that peaceful protesters aren't always what they seem to be." Sharp-eyed Twitter detectives quickly pinpointed and zoomed in on the criminal's face. And they got pictures of that here and some tweets. And the article continues and says the liberal mainstream media has repeatedly bleated how important peaceful protests are to American democracy, but ignore the widespread vandalism and violence of leftist protesters who have beaten up, bullied, and harassed Trump supporters around the country. The fact that the hair lighting incident happened on Inauguration Day in our nation's capital as a crowd chanted "Love Trump's hate" shows the left has no respect for laws or people. Not a single mainstream media outlet reported the incident, even though it was caught on videotape. The Women's March on January the 21st in Edmonton, Ontario, a man named Dion Booz, and that's B-E-W-S, punched conservative reporter Sheila Gunn Reid in the face. And there is video of that and some tweets. It says, while the mainstream media is pushing the narrative that these anti-Trump protests are grassroots movements, investigative reports show leftist billionaire George Soros is bankrolling these staged protests. Soros has repeatedly slammed Trump and vowed to make his life hell once he takes office. And there's some more tweets. It says, Trump supporters said the violence, vandalism, and bullying of psychotic anti-Trumpers will only ensure he gets elected. The next article that I have for you is off of Breitbart.com. I'm waiting for the hamster to get it up here. Here we go. Protesters, most Inauguration Day protesters who were arrested will be charged with felony rioting. Most of the estimated 230 protesters who were arrested on Inauguration Day will face felony rioting charges, according to federal prosecutors. Those arrested will be released without having to post bail on the condition that they return to court in February, CBS News reports. If charged, the protesters could face a sentence of up to 10 years in federal prison and a fine of up to $250,000, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Interim D.C. Police Chief Peter Newsom said 217 people were being charged with rioting. The arrest took place in a 4-block stretch around downtown while President Trump was being sworn in. Protesters burned waste canisters, threw the embers at police, and broke windows of businesses downtown. Police used pepper spray and sting balls against the crowd. Officers suffered minor injuries due to the protest, with 3 of the officers hit in the head with flying objects, WUSA reports. Next article is off of bizpackreview.com. It says leaked Media Matters memo details impeachment plans for Trump. Confidential memo from Media Matters founder David Brock that was obtained by the Washington Free Beacon lays out how he intends to use his other far-left organizations to reverse Trump's presidency. According to the 44-page single-spaced memo, Brock intends to employ his American Bridge super PAC to take down the president through impeachment. No other progressive organization has the resources and assets that has amassed over the past several election cycles to hold Trump, his administration, and the politicians accountable, the confidential memo states. Only Bridge stands ready with staff already hired, Trump's web of business ties mapped out, and massive video archives at our fingertips, it continued. The right will bolster Trump's aggressively and deceptively. The campaign to stop him must be nonstop at American Bridge. It has already begun. American Bridge has also called on the FBI to investigate Trump's Secretary of State pick, former ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson, and claims that Trump intends to cash in on his presidency while ignoring the Clintons' act of doing precisely that. The Free Beacon reports Brock's group claims to have more than 20,000 hours of video, 289 candidate research books, and the largest available archive of Trump research in the Democratic Party within weeks of the election. Bridge launched a Trump war room, which has already scrutinized Trump's transition team and will continue to watch the personal policies and practices of the administration. The state-of-the-art Trump war room will strive to uncover details of Trump's affection for Russia and Putin. They are tracking Trump's foreign and domestic business partners, construction projects in foreign countries, and negotiations on potential future projects that he could use to put personal profit ahead of our national security. With so many opportunities for foreign governments and corporations to gain influence over Trump, American Bridge will use every means at its disposal to hold Trump and his administration accountable, including Freedom of Information Act requests, lawsuits, and regulatory complaints. As the progressive movement's potential research clearinghouse, as the progressive movement's political research clearinghouse, we will arm our allies to join us in taking on the administration through paid advertising, earned media, grassroots efforts, and legal recourse. Trump hasn't been president for even a week, given little chance for foreign governments and corporations to gain influence over the new chief executive. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton's influence peddling while she served as the Secretary of State has been well documented. But the difference is that Brock is and was a Clinton supporter. The next one that I have is off of activistpost.com. Yes, if I can get it to work with me here. Soros exposed funding over 50 organizations in Women's March on DC. An investigation by the New York Times affiliate has revealed that the billionaire globalist financier George Soros, who recently called Donald Trump a would-be dictator during an interview at Davos, and whose Open Society Foundation works to finance and forward progressive causes across the world, and is intimately connected to numerous color revolutions, the Arab Spring, and various other political uprisings across the globe, has been revealed to be connected to more than 50 of the groups that organized the nationwide women's marches that saw millions of Americans take to the streets across the country. The march's official website says, "We stand together recognizing that defending the most marginalized among us is defending all of us." Many people turned out to be a manifestation of that ideal, but it's important to understand the reality of what's happening on the strategic political level as an inorganic, politically contrived and funded event. This in no way takes away from the validity of standing up for women's issues, but it's important to note that women are being used as pawns in a larger ideological political game that has international overtones of power politics. These marches were largely billed as spontaneous and grassroots actions by publications like The Guardian and Vox. However, the reality exposed an investigation by self-described liberal feminists, uh, Azra Q. Nominee, writing for the New York Times affiliate Women in the World, revealed that after studying the funding, politics, and talking points of some 403 groups that are partners of the march, contrary to the nonpartisan rhetoric used in these marches, they were not really women's march, but were rather for women who are anti-Trump. Namani reveals that the women's marches were actually organized as political tools to be used to strategically forward a progressive political agenda against President Donald Trump, exposing the protests to largely be an organized, top-down driven political operation and not an organic movement of concerned Americans taking to the streets as reported by the mainstream media. According to Namani, women in the New York, or try this again, Women in the World New York Times report says, following the money, I poured through documents of billionaire George Soros and his Open Society philanthropy because I wondered, what is the link between one of Hillary Clinton's largest donors and the Women's March? I found out plenty. By my draft research, which I'm opening up for crowdsourcing on Google Docs, Soros has funded or has close relationship with at least 56 of the march's partners, including key partners, Planned Parenthood, which opposes Trump's anti-abortion policy, and the National Resources Defense Council, which opposes Trump's environmental policies. The other Soros ties with Women's March organizations include the partisan MoveOn.org, which was fiercely pro-Clinton, the National Action Network, which has a former executive director lauded by Obama senior advisor Valerie Jarrett as a leader of tomorrow, as a March co-chair, and another official as the head of logistics. Other Soros grantees who are partners in the march are the American Civil Liberties Union, Center for Constitutional Rights, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch. March organizers and the organizations identified here haven't yet returned queries for comment. Much like the post-election protests, which included a sign, "Kill Trump," were not spontaneous, as reported by some of the media outlets. The Women's March of strategic identity politics that has so fractured America today, from the campuses to communities. On the left or the right, it's wrong. But with inauguration, we know the politics. With the march, women have been appropriated for clearly anti-Trump day. When I shared my thoughts with her, my yoga studio owner said it was sad the march organizers masked their politics. I want love for everyone, she said. The way Soros operates is in an ideological philanthropist whose society foundation provides funding for organizations whose interests align with his own, and which blurs the line between political advocacy and social justice, thus being able to leverage selected funded social justice organizations to affect political discourse. This method is confirmed in a memo released by WikiLeaks, which was sent to Soros by Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta. The Clinton campaign reveals the political motives behind using grassroots organization to control political discourse. Podesta wrote to Soros that he wanted to better utilize these networks to drive the content of politics through a strong echo chamber. Control the political discourse. So much effort over the past few years has been focused on better coordinating, strengthening, and developing progressive institutions and leaders. Now that this enhanced infrastructure is in place, grassroots organizing, multi-issue advocacy groups, think tanks, youth outreach, faith communities, micro-targeting outfits, the Netroots and blogosphere. We need to better utilize these networks to drive the content of politics through a strong echo chamber and message delivery system. Familiar with the history of the Soros Open Society Foundation in Eastern Europe and around the world since the late 1980s will know that his supposedly philanthropic democracy building projects in Poland, Russia, or the Ukraine in the late 1990s allowed Soros to literally plunder the former communist countries' wealth, according to the New Eastern Outlook. A report in the New Eastern Outlook revealed exactly how Soros-affiliated organizations across the world operate. The totality of what is revealed in the three hacked documents show that Soros is effectively the puppet master pulling most of the strings. In Kiev, Soros Foundation Ukraine branch, International Resistance Foundation, the IRF, has been involved in Ukraine since 1989. His IRF doled out more than $100 billion to the Ukrainian NGOs 2 years before the fall of the Soviet Union, creating the preconditions for the Ukraine's independence from Russia in 1991. Soros also admitted to financing the 2013-2014 Maiden Square protests that brought the current government into power. Soros's foundations were also deeply involved in the 2004 Orange Revolution that brought the corrupt but pro-NATO Viktor Yushchenko into power with his American wife, who had been in the U.S. State Department. In 2004, just weeks after Soros International Resistance Foundation had succeeded in getting Viktor Yushchenko as president of the Ukraine, Michael McFaul wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post. McFaul, a specialist in organizing color revolutions, who later became U.S. ambassador to Russia, revealed, "Did Americans meddle in the international affairs of the Ukraine? Yes. The American agents of influence would prefer different language to describe their activities: democratic assistance, democracy promotion, civil society support, etc. But their work, however labeled, seeks to influence political change in the Ukraine." Additionally, during the 2016 presidential cycle, Soros committed $25 million to the 2016 campaign of Hillary Clinton. Per the standard Clinton operating procedure, this was indicative of the symbolic relationship of favors between the billionaire and his array of political puppets across the globe. Soros has often been accused of using his wealth to attempt to socially engineer the national domestic politics of an entire states. He was accused of being connected to organizations that organized and funded the nationwide protests after the election of Donald Trump, a claim that Soros denies. There have been many false reports about George Soros and the Open Society Foundation funding protests in the wake of the U.S. presidential elections. There is no truth to these reports, said a spokeswoman from the Soros Open Society Foundation in a statement, adding, "We support a wide range of organizations, including those that support women and minorities who have historically been denied equal rights, many of whom are concerned about what policy changes may lie ahead. We are proud of their work. We, of course, support the right of all Americans to peacefully assemble and petition the government, a vital and constitutionally safeguarded pillar of a functioning democracy. Make no mistake that the events you're seeing transpired nationwide are largely being coordinated in part by a billionaire political elite class that's looking to strategically forward a political agenda. Soros has used the same formula, format domestic unrest to affect political goals in numerous nations, and it certainly looks as if he now has the United States in his sights. It's clear that Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals is being employed by the left in an effort to destabilize and undermine political discourse in the U.S. Women's rights are unquestionably human rights issues, not a political issue, which makes it disappointing that we as free individuals don't don't organically create manifestations like these large-scale marches without oligarchs political interests essentially making it happen as means of forwarding their particular ideology driven political agenda. And then the final thing that I have for you, this is something for you to pull up. It'll be the very last one in the URLs that I've listed in the description of the video. It is a petition that you can sign that is for the deport of George Soros. And what it says here underneath this is on this website, some of the anti-Trump protests in the U.S. have been organized by groups that were sponsored by the Clinton sympathizer and billionaire George Soros. Elections 2016. Among WikiLeaks Podesta emails was a strategy document involving the Soros-supported MoveOn.org and grassroots organizing and funding. MoveOn.org issued a press release on Wednesday afternoon about the protests, where they wrote hundreds of Americans, dozens of organizations to gather peacefully outside the White House and in cities, towns nationwide to take a continued stand against misogyny, racism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia. Tonight, thousands of Americans will come together at hundreds of peaceful gatherings in cities and towns across the nation, including outside the White House, following the results of Tuesday's presidential election. The gatherings, organized by MoveOn.org and allies, a continued rejection of Donald Trump's bigotry, xenophobia, Islamophobia, and misogyny, and demonstrate our resolve to fight together for the America we still believe is possible, the statement continued. Those that are stirring it up, and many of them do work for Soros-fronted organizations, are really telling those innocent protesters, and perhaps less innocent protesters, they are in danger by Trump, even though Trump has done nothing but preach unity since he won the election. Marko Gasic, a British Serbian political commentator, told the RT on Friday. The global elite's objections to President-elect Donald Trump is perhaps different from what they are telling protesters, Gasic said. It's an election where they had all of the media, power, and money, and yet they've lost him, Gasic said. Toss-up now between the Clintons' Soros view that the only democracy allowed is a one-party democracy that agrees with what they say, and if that doesn't happen, then they're ready to do a counter-revolution to destroy that democracy and the Democratic vote. However, Gasic doesn't think they would try to get rid of Trump, but they want to intimidate him to get him to agree to social peace at home, as long as the global elites are allowed to pursue their wars abroad. They want him to become a neocon just like they are. he added. And then it's got some links where you can go to read more on this. And there's a little bit more to that article if you want to go to this change.org petition. And it says that right now they have 2,998 supporters, and they need another 2,002 to reach their 5,000 goal. So you can pull that up and take a look at that if you would like to. And that's all I have for you in this episode, but there will be more episodes this morning, so stay tuned. If you like what we're doing here, give it a thumbs up, share it on your social media so that everybody gets to hear the news. Don't forget to subscribe. If you click that little bell next to that subscription button, a little box pops up, and you can check that box. Every time I do a show, you'll get an email alert. That way, you'll stay informed.